This is Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr., and coming your way, we have a new Sidney Brown injury update. And will the Birds, because of the injury to Sidney Brown and his recovery coming off that torn ACL, make a move at safety, or will they stand pat with C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship as the safety tandem, with maybe Avonte Maddox and James Bradbury mixing in and getting some snaps at that spot? As for Sidney Brown, this report coming from Jimmy Kempski, a Philly voice. He's been covering the Birds for so long, and he is reporting that Sidney Brown is going to start training camp on PUP. We had an expectation that this was going to happen because Sidney Brown tore that ACL in the regular season finale on the awful turf of MetLife Stadium against the New York Giants, and it looks as though that news is going to be official. Here's what Jimmy Kempski had to say about the injury to Sidney Brown, his recovery, and him starting on the physically unable to perform list. Eagles safety Sidney Brown will begin training camp on PUP, according to a source. The PUP list is a tool that teams use for players prior to the start of training camp in case the player is not ready for the start of the regular season. The PUP list must be applied to a player prior to the start of training camp, or it cannot be used at all. Once a player practices in camp at all, they immediately become ineligible for the PUP list during the regular season. The player cannot participate in practice while on the PUP list. Now, with this, we'll see if Sidney Brown is an IR candidate to start the regular season. When we passed along a Sidney Brown injury update a few weeks ago, we had discussed how he tore his ACL against the Giants on Christmas. In the spring, he was doing work on the side, and we were given that injury update a few weeks ago for him doing that work on the side. He's optimistic about his recovery. He was starting to hit the assault treadmill, reaching 20-plus miles per hour. All of that news was obviously good in his recovery. When a player goes on PUP before training camp starts, it's out of precaution, and you don't really want to take up a roster spot for a player who isn't ready to partake in training camp practices yet, and you want to err on the side of caution with his recovery. In 2023, he didn't play a lot to start the year, but as the Eagles' defense was awful and his injuries occurred at that safety position toward the middle to tail end of the year, he started to get some more run for one of the worst defenses in the NFL and one of the worst defenses I've ever laid my eyes on in watching Eagles football since I was 4 years old. But there was some good with Brown, with how he played as a third-round pick out of Illinois as a rookie last year. Overall Pro Football Focus grade of 62, a run defense grade of 56.7, only a pass rush grade of 49.9, but that's not really much of his specialty. A coverage grade of 64.9, allowed a passer rating allowed of 113.7. He did have to play a little bit in the slot. I don't think that's the natural position for him. I think it's more of a hybrid linebacker or playing that safety position. During the preseason last year, we saw the athleticism on display, how he plays with this hair on fire, how he's really physical. He's not afraid to lay a hit, and he really has that good range sideline to sideline. He can get overly aggressive, causing him to over-pursue at times so he can be out of position, leading to a splash play. But when I scouted his rookie year, I love the speed and physicality to his game. I think that you can work off of that, and I think that Vic Fangio should be excited about the prospects of Sidney Brown becoming a good player. I mentioned him playing with his hair on fire. There's some good and bad with that, right? Like, you love how aggressive he is, how physical he is, but sometimes because of that, he can miss tackles by over-pursuing, and he can be out of position. I do think that he made some good plays around the line of scrimmage. There's some positional versatility with the player like this. He got beat out of the slot. He did, in the pre-draft process, have a pretty solid 40-yard dash, but I don't think he's twitchy enough to play out of the slot. I think he has more of that long speed. Now, in the pre-draft process, we always like to take a look at these relative athletic scores, and all of these prospects are graded on a scale of 0 to 10, and he earned an RAS score of 9.24. That's pretty good. A lot of green on your screen right here. The red, his height. He's only 5'9", 211 pounds, so he's a little bit shorter, but he's explosive. Vertical leap, 40.5 inches. Really good broad jump at 10 feet, 10 inches. And then his 40-yard dash, a sub 4.5, that's pretty good. And then a good 20-yard split and a 10-yard split. My thoughts on the safety spot, it's a little bit of a position of question right now going into training camp. CJ Gardner-Johnson, during my perfect Eagles offseason plan, and when we took a look at our top free agent targets at the start of free agency, I wanted to see Philadelphia bring him back. His lone season in Philadelphia, I thought he was tremendous. He's a ball hawk, has really good instinctual skills. I like his versatility because he can play out of the slot. In that deep safety role, he does need to stay healthy. When he was with Philadelphia, he got injured, still tied with Justin Simmons for the league high in interceptions that year. And then last year, he got hurt right from the jump with the Detroit Lions in game number 1 or game number 2, and him missing time has been a troubling storyline of his NFL career. But you have the versatility, you have the swagger, and you have his ability to generate turnovers. And the Eagles as a defense last year did not generate turnovers. It was problematic, and they were minus 10 in turnover differential a year ago. Just awful. And a stark difference from what they did in 2022 when they led the league in sacks with 70. It went down to 55 last year, and they couldn't muster giveaways. Reed Blankenship, the opposite starting safety to CD Deuce, I think is a solid player in this league. The Pro Football Focus grades have checked out. He's a pretty sound tackler. It's really hard to gauge which players last year for the Eagles played well and which players played poorly because the scheme was so awful. Players played out of position. They weren't put in positions to succeed. Sean Desai was in over his skis. And then Matt Patricia, there's a reason why he hasn't been able to have a steady job since being the Patriots defensive coordinator. Canned by Detroit, and then since then, he was brought in as a defensive assistant, a defensive specialist for Philadelphia last year. And he wasn't running his scheme. So it was overall just an awful situation for the Eagles. Mekhi Garner, as far as a depth piece, the jury is still out on him. And then is Philadelphia going to experiment with Devontae Maddox and James Bradbury as depth pieces at safety? Because depth at that position is somewhat of a concern. The top free agent safety still left there on the open market. We've talked plenty about Justin Simmons here on Eagles Now. I think Quandre Diggs would be able to help out this team a lot. You still have Micah Hyde on the free agency market. Kareem Jackson and Deshaun Gibson. Gibson, he wants to continue playing, and he's been in the league for more than a decade, but he did get popped for PEDs, so he would be suspended for 6 games to start the year, but he's been a serviceable player for San Francisco the last couple of years for a team that made it to the NFC Championship game before losing to Philadelphia, and then last year, as we know, made it to the Super Bowl. And look, I see plenty of the comments. It's so funny to me how people get so fired up when we talk about Justin Simmons on this show. And they're like, talk about something else. Look at the channel history. We talk about plenty here on Eagles Now. Hours and hours of content every single week. And I get that people don't think it's realistic. I think it is. And people are tired of us talking about him, but does he make you better? Yes. Is he good? Yes. Was he a second-team All-Pro last year? Yes. Does Justin Simmons help you win a Super Bowl? Yes. And does he help you at a position of need? Yes. This Eagles secondary last year was awful to epic proportions. The Eagles have remade that entire unit. That's a big reason why Howie Roseman drafted Quinion Mitchell and drafted Cooper DeJean. You have Isaiah Rodgers coming off the gambling suspension. You brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson. You had to address the holes and the blemishes amidst that Eagles secondary. And Justin Simmons would be able to help with leadership. Eagles didn't have that last year. Overall good play. Eagles didn't have that last year. Generating turnovers, an area where the Eagles struggled in 2023. But also Philadelphia is going to be implementing a new defensive scheme under new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. Justin Simmons played under Vic Fangio for a couple of years while with the Denver Broncos. That's why I think it would make sense. He's still out there, and I think it would just make this Philadelphia Eagles defense a lot better. So it's time for you to grade the Eagles safety situation as currently constituted. A, B, C, D, or F. Make sure you let me know. And also make sure you give me a follow on social media. I had a couple of Eagles fans reach out over the weekend because, as I like to say, don't be a stranger. Say what's up. I'm on X. So close to 13,000 followers. I'm on Instagram, just surpassed 31,000 followers. I put out a lot of short form content on my social media pages. And our NFC East sub battle, only a few days left here in the month of July. Let's take down the Commanders report. Most subscribers picked up since July 1st. We're in second place right now. Let's change that. Hit that sub button for daily coverage of the Philadelphia Eagles. As always, thank you so much for watching. A lot of updates going to be coming out of training camp, and we have you covered right here on Eagles Now.